Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. Today I'm going to be talking about what happened in round 9 of the Sinquefield Cup played in St. Louis. In this first game, I'll be talking about Maxime Vachier Lagrave playing white against Veselin Topalov playing black. Both of these guys are out of contention for the first and second prizes, I think. And it's pretty much decided that Carlson and Caruana and Carlson will be playing for first and second. But still, I want to cover this game because it's pretty interesting. And Vale started out as he's white. So he started with knight f3, d5 played by Topalov, g3. We have a ready opening, and this is the opening chosen by Anand in the World Championship match. In this position, I think Carlsen played in his third game against Anand with white c4 in this position. I'm pretty sure he did. And but in this game, MVL just chose bishop g2, pretty natural. Bishop g7. And yeah, white has a couple of options here. You can play c4, you can play d4, and both of those are fine. But he played castles instead and allowed this e5 move. Both of those c4 and d4 pawn moves kind of inadvertently stopped that pawn move probably. But I don't think white really cares that he allowed e5 in this position. He played d3, and this is almost let's say a reverse King's Indian, King's Indian with reverse colors, I think. Black played really solidly with knight e7, not developing his knight over here because the pawn is hanging in that position. And after knight e7, white played e4. I think white can also consider c4. That doesn't look that bad either, but he played e4, and black castled. White decided to take the pawn. He doesn't really want to commit his knight here just yet. It's not really clear if this is the best spot. In traditional King's Indian style, I guess this is an okay move if you're playing this. This is all right, but I mean, white is pretty solid here, and he probably wouldn't play d4, allowing knight e2 and the typical King's Indian stuff with f4 after knight e1. Instead, in this position, white played really positionally. He took the pawn over here, forcing the recapture by either the queen or the knight. Black took the knight. And in this position, MVO played knight c3, putting some tension in the center. You have these ideas of knight e5 always in the position. And, in this position, Topalov just played knight c6. I think he can also consider capturing over here, and you get some pretty interesting complications with, the double pawns over here, but black plays e4 to completely open up the position. And after pawn takes pawn, bishop takes here, rook b1. I mean, white can also consider moving the bishop to h6. That's not out of the question. But probably just rook b1, and I don't know. The queen trade probably looks reasonable. I mean, the position's probably equal anyway. That's an interesting way of approaching the position, but not as exciting. Okay, after knight c6, played by Topalov, in this position, white decided to play rook e1. Also, you can also consider knight takes e5 in this position, but there are some tactical complications that come along with this. Black can take on c3, seems fair enough, and now the knight is threatened on e5, so only move is knight takes here, threatening your queen, threatening my queen. So you kind of get this weird bunch of desperado sacrifices by both sides, and usually white probably has to give in since he doesn't really have a good way of recapturing. And at the end, I think this position is probably good for white. Not good for white. I mean, just okay for white. I don't know. Notice that the b7 pawn is hanging if you leave. If this bishop decides to move over here, knight takes b6, and white has a really nice bishop. So he probably has to take this knight, and after rook takes b2, a move like c6, blunting this bishop, it gives black really an okay position. So that's an interesting line, but both sides just wanted to keep the tension in the position. So in this position, white just played rook e1. Fair enough. And now in this position, since white was actually threatening combination here, let's say if black played a wasting move, right, with a6. I think then white would just take the chop off the knight here. The queen would have to recapture, and now white would take the pawn over here. And now I think white just wins a pawn. This queen has to move. White captures here next move, and he has a good position. So after rook e1, black I think played not a6. He played knight d e7, backing up the knight here. Since this knight is under threat, I mean, he doesn't really want to commit his bishop here just yet, perhaps, although that looks pretty natural. White may have knight g5 in that position, so he wants to drop this knight back, making sure everything's protected, and plus this gets out of the d-file, where the queen kind of influences the position, prevents the d4 pawn push. This is quite an okay move by black, I think. And in this position, I was really confused when I saw White's MBL's next move. I mean, at first I didn't really understand it at all, but he played a4, and this pretty much is just planning to play a5, taking some space, and I still don't really understand it entirely, but as the game progresses, I guess we can figure out how it helped. Black played h6. Perhaps he's kind of thinking about f5 in this position, followed by bishop e6. This would actually be an interesting transposition to a Dutch position that I would really like to play for black. White played a5. He just keeps on pushing this pawn, and for some, I'm still not 100% sure, but perhaps the idea is that after a6, this b pawn will be gone soon, and then this diagonal will be open for the white bishop. Perhaps this is his idea. So Topalov's next move is kind of an indicator that he doesn't want to allow black to play this a6 move. He just decided to play a6 himself. White continued with his development, and certainly black can play knight f5, gaining a tempo on this bishop, but I don't know, maybe knight f5, bishop c5 is very similar to the game, actually. So he just decided to play rook e8, a prophylactic move, and also he's just supporting the pawn here, just in case it's just kind of an overprotection thing. White played queen d2, black played knight f5. Notice that the h6 pawn is hanging also, so you have to protect this. I don't think king h7 is ideal, and knight f5 just attacks the bishop and feels more natural. White decided to go bishop c5. He doesn't want to give up the bishop pair in this position. I don't know, a random move like this is probably running into knight takes e3, and rook takes e3 is very okay for black. Maybe f5. Black is doing well. So probably not that, and you have to probably go bishop c5, and in this position, I think black decided to play rook b8 and perhaps allow his bishop to come out here without worrying about the b7 pawn here. White placed his knight in a nice square in the center, potentially influencing some of the center. And I mean, it's kind of allowing the knight to jump here later, perhaps. And in this position, I mean, black could play bishop e6, and I think he's doing quite fine in this position. I mean, after c3 by white or something, I don't know, bishop a3, b4, you get some really, really weird complications. Queen d7 in this position looks pretty natural for black, and I don't know, bishop a3. And if white gets in b4, and you can just back up the bishop and be okay. This bishop's not doing much and along this diagonal right over here anyway. Maybe white's doing okay. I don't know. Black can probably grab this pawn. I'm not sure about this kind of stuff, attacking the queen, grabbing the bishop pair, queen d8, or this kind of stuff is really, really unclear to me. I mean, sure, black has an extra pawn, but I mean, maybe a move like queen c2 preventing that is opening up the position to white's favor, probably. I'm not really sure about this position, really. Looks pretty interesting. I don't know about it. Maybe black's up a pawn for nothing. That's kind of my guess. But b6 just makes a lot of sense. But the only problem is you're kind of committing to these weak pawns over here. That's the only thing I don't like. And after pawn takes pawn, bishop had to go back here. There's no way black wouldn't, just take this bishop as it comes there to e3. And of course, the only square left is bishop here. And in this position, black really has to make use of these weird position knights. If they don't do anything in the center, what's the point? And this bishop's kind of blocked by this knight. This knight is protruding in the way. Let's say not protruding, obstructing the c file. So he centralizes one of the knights here. And white doesn't really have anything better looking than the game continuation, which was just capturing the knight here. And at least he opens up the bishop over here. So in this position, black probably can take with a pawn, but I'm not sure if he wants to blunt this bishop forever. So knight takes d4 looks more natural, centralizing this knight. Bishop is really, really solid, protecting this knight over here. In this position, we kind of can understand white's next move. White would like to play c3, kicking up this knight, but the problem is after c3, there's knight b3. So this is kind of why NBL played queen d1 in this position. it's a lot of strategic maneuvering here. Right now, the game hasn't really heated up in this position. So after queen d1, black developed with bishop b7, white played c3. The knight had to go away to b5, attacking this bishop. Look how funny this bishop is, as it can't really go anywhere. Really, really weird. And in this position, I mean, d3 is hanging, so there's quite a number of interesting moves in this position. And white decided to play with queen b3. Not a bad move. And notice that the d3 pawn is not hanging, I think because of rook ad1 trapping the queen. I think this is right. So you can't take the pawn over here. Notice that bishop d5 is actually met by this strong move, knight f6 check, when d5 is hanging over here. I don't know, queen takes here is, I mean, either queen takes or bishop takes leaves. I don't know, what would I wonder what would be the best move. Probably bishop takes is probably best, and I don't know, black traps off this or something. This position looks very, very comfortable for white. His bishop is better than this bishop in this position, and white should get a decent position out of that, I think. I think that sorry guys, if my board just glitched for a second. I hate this. Bishop d5 was not played because of this knight f6 idea. So going back, instead of these moves kind of look natural to you when you first see them, but black played a really, really solid move in queen d7. Pretty understandable. Just kind of connecting the rooks over here. Queen really has nice open lines here. Can still influence all parts of the board. Just kind of a normal waiting move. And in this position, the pawn is it needs some attention. So I mean, certainly white could play rook ad1, and that would be natural. But white played rook e3, and both sides played pretty natural moves. King h7 is not just kind of a, let's say, getting out of the pin over here, putting the king in a safer spot, also allowing f5 here. And after rook ae1, black played f5. And this position, I slightly prefer black because of those really, really nicely placed pieces. The awkward knight and rook combination over here. And even though white's pieces are also active, I like black's space in this position. I think black is even, I don't know, I mean, I like black a little bit here. Although it shouldn't be too bad for him. Knight d2 played by white. White doesn't really have another retreating square. And in this position, black just took the bishop over here. Pretty normal. King takes. And now rook e6, protecting this pawn with rook e here. Black can chop this bishop anytime off. He's the one that has pretty much decent sized control over the position. Although white doesn't really have anything. He doesn't really have anything special as black. I mean, I'll play knight f3, attacking this pawn again with e8. And now in this position, I mean, MVL played a little bit of a waiting move in this position. It's hard to recommend anything for him. His king is slightly weird over here. You're always prone to these checks along this diagonal if this knight has to move, so he just decided to move the king out of the way. A pretty safe move, really. And, black could have just taken here and pretty much had an equal game, but okay, this is the move that he played in the game is fine too. e4. Yeah, just opening up the bishop over here, getting rid of the tension over here. Pretty reasonable. And in this position, I think white can probably, the game continuation is probably okay. He just took the pawn, certainly reasonable, and black captured here. Rook takes. Instead of rook takes, by the way, you can also consider rook d1, but probably queen e6, and white has nothing special. Notice that your e3 rook is hanging, along with this queen hanging, and you probably have the queen trade, and after this position is really nothing special for white. I mean, probably even capture the bishop and you get a dead drawn endgame. Oh my god. Certainly that was possible for white, but I mean, it's all pretty trivial for these high-rated guys. They look at everything and it's all simple to them. MVL just took the rook over here, and after rook takes here, he played rook d1, gaining tempo on the queen, queen e8, influenced the file over here. The game just fizzles out into a pretty equalish position. Both sides have a symmetrical kind of structure. This isn't so symmetrical, but it looks pretty solid. And in this position, knight takes a3 was played, and even though white has some weak pawns over here, it's not necessarily easy to take advantage of them. He tried queen e7, putting some pressure on the h3 pawn, but white didn't really care. He played h4, and probably the idea behind this move is that he can play queen f7 at some point, or rook d7 or something. Probably after this move, I think one idea in this kind of position is that queen takes a3 is met by the strong move h5, removing the base chain of the pawn over here, and if the black pawn decides to move here in this position, white will capture the pawn over here with check, winning the rook. So this position is not ideal for black. In fact, white actually has a dangerous attack in this position. After h4, black gets careless with pawn grabbing. He shouldn't do that. He played queen c5, and the idea is to meet h5 with just the queen trade, right? Makes a lot of sense. And in this position, white ended up playing h5 anyway. A very, very solid move, and pretty much ends all hope for both sides to try to win. And as the game continuation leads to a very, very drawish position, king takes, rook takes d5, bishop takes here, and now in this position, rook d6 check, winning the b6 pawn, king f7. At first I thought black would be slightly better after rook a4, rook takes here, because he has the passed pawn, but after knight h4, look how difficult it is to defend this pawn, and rook a5 is the only move to do that, but rook c6, and you're tied to both of these pawns, and they just agreed to a draw. White certainly has no winning chances in this position, let me say that, but at least it's a pretty decent draw by white in this position. I'm not really sure if either side had anything in this game, but I think it was a really, really well played, fair draw, really. And it stayed about equal level during the whole game. Neither side had their huge opportunities. Well, it was just a well played positional game, and this weird bishop on a3 just kind of stood out to me. And black played pretty much all the good moves in this position and really deserved this draw. I think Topalov tries to play as actively as possible. So if he gets something like this, it's no surprise. Anyways, guys, I hope you liked this video. Thanks for watching. Appreciate that. And I'll post the other games soon enough. See ya.